Welcome back again to this YouTube channel, The Diary of the Coffee Hunter. Thank you very much for checking back. And if you haven't done so already, please subscribe, like, share, and comment. In the previous video, I shared with you the work that we are doing at a homestead that we inherited from my late parents, that we are renovating and upgrading in preparation of our return from the diaspora in retirement. I did mention that the work that we have done so far has not been without any challenges, of which I said we had a solution to some of those challenges, because I understand those challenges are faced by anybody, particularly in the diaspora, wishing to do a similar project. I had intended to make a few passing comments in this particular video about the problems that we have encountered so far during this project. Having gone through the comments of the previous video, I realized there was a need to do a proper sit-down video where I go through some of the challenges that we have faced, some of the issues that we've had to deal with, and then share with everybody the solution that we have come up with for anybody who is intending or wishes to undertake a similar project such as ours. In this video, I am therefore just going to go ahead and share with you the second part of the inheritance, the farmland.
Well done.
So part of the inheritance involves a piece of land somewhere, kumunda. That's my brother there. It's the eldest. Mr. Vincent, say hello.
Hello.
The setup in rural Zimbabwe is that you get a piece of land which accommodates your homestead, and then you either around your homestead or maybe a short walk somewhere else, you then have a piece of land which is sort of like your farm. It would have kumunda. Those that are familiar with the Zim rural setup will understand what it means to say somebody's going kumunda, because usually it's a short walk. But however, here in Buhera, in this little corner of Buhera, what happened was the village here is very near. It's on the banks of Sabi River, Save, and where it meets with another river called Mwera. So that kind of forms the boundary. But long ago, or about 30 years ago, more than 30 years ago, people were located, they were just dotted around this whole plain. And then an NGO, I think it was Christian Aid, they came with a plan because they wanted to maximize, one, to see if they experiment with this plan, arranging people to live in a certain way, they will be able to maximize production. So what they did was they divided up the whole land and designated part of the land for housing, for homesteads, and then another area for farmland, and then another area as paddocks for cattle. Because what would happen is, under normal, especially in the rain season, you would need people to go and tend to cattle. And in Christian Aid's thinking, that was a waste of resources, because able young men would spend the whole day looking after cattle. So they created this system where they would have paddocks, and the whole infrastructure for everything, the paddocks, the fencing, even along the Sabi River to keep cattle away from the river, and all the trenches that were needed for piped water coming from all the way up there. All that was done by local villagers in a scheme that was called Food for Work. So all villagers were expected to take part, be seen to be working, and in exchange they would be given some food instead of just receiving aid for free. So that encouraged everybody to take part, and it worked. And in the early years, throughout the 90s, it seemed a fantastic model, because people did not need to herd cattle. They would just, in the morning, take them out, go and leave them in the paddocks, and they would be able to spend more time in their fields. So the idea then was, you know, there would be more production. Obviously, everything then fell apart after the year 2000, and then the economic situation in Zimbabwe sort of like took a downturn. So now standing in the middle of the farmland. So everything around me, everything around me, everything around me. Beautiful piece of land. It just needs to be utilized somehow, one way or the other. What to do? Who knows? Looks like good pastures though. Cattle could thrive here. So this is Kumunda. We grew up knowing this place as Kumunda. So what would happen is, you know, every school holiday, you come here, you live the luxury of living in the teacher's house at some rural school, further up towards the west there. And then you come here and you wake up early mornings, you come and work the fields, and around 9, 10 in the morning, they tell the girls to go home, to go and prepare breakfast, some meal, and then an hour or so later, the boys follow, you have your breakfast, and then you take your cattle. And we used to herd cattle across the river. So the mountains that are across there, that used to be a farm belonging to a commercial farmer called Kun. And then at some point, 1983, I think, 1982, 83, he decided to leave, up and leave. So he left that whole stretch of farm, I think, probably at one of the biggest farms owned by any single farmer. Because it's straight from that mountain over there all the way down there to where Save River meets Mwerare. And so when he left, that then formed the pastures. So people lived on this side of the river. So when you take your cattle, you go across the river and you spend the day there herding cattle. And then you come back mid to late afternoon if you've got cows that need milking, and then you have to come back. And at times it's the cows that would force you to return because they'll be wanting to come back to their calves, their babies. And then you'd have the evening slot where you sort of like remain local with the cattle. This is where we used to, childhood, part of our childhood was spent a holiday doing this. My father was a teacher, but he spent his entire life thinking he was a farmer. He considered himself a master farmer, but it was we saw more of his talk than the results from the field. But there were good years. There were good years. There were good years that I could remember. And there used to be like a swamp down there where he used to put rice. He used to grow rice, red rice. That would be, yeah, very nice when prepared with peanut butter. And that was life. That was life. I miss those good old days. Simple, innocent, not a worry in the world. You know, you go across there and you're herding cattle, and this area is very good for cattle. My grandfather had over 100 heads. That was over 100. That he actually used to have this lawn scheme that now you look back, you actually realize he had some enterprise going. He had a lawn scheme, so people that have been recently married and they're starting their own family and they would not have any livestock, you would loan them a couple of steers and a cow, and then they'll be able to till the land, and then they could keep the milk. I think that was the arrangement, but he just needed to know when they give birth or something, but they could keep the milk, they could use the cattle, so that way that would reduce the burden of him looking after his own cattle. And then so it was fun. Looking after cattle was fun, because you'd have each homestead had its own herd, and in that herd they will have their own bull, and the fun, the bullfights, yeah, were highlight peak of cattle herding. We had ours called Record, which succumbed to, what year drought was it?
92.
The 1992 drought. But it was a deadly fighter. It was a deadly fighter. It wasn't big in build, but it knew how to stand its ground and toss around its horns. Yeah, we used to enjoy those fights. And every homestead was known by their bull. It was known by their bull. Buru Rekwa, But that was life. That was life. But all this land here is now back to almost virgin land. It needs work on all this land. We shall see what we can do. Sadly, you can't grow coffee here. You need to go to the higher grounds, about 60 kilometers in the other direction. But you could try the Robusta variety, because you could do Robusta here and it would do very well. I should hunt for those seeds from somewhere and try Robusta coffee and see how it goes. Zimbabwe is only Arabica at the minute, but things could change. So imagining this was your walk every day with such tranquility, not a sound of a car for miles, just birds chirping, some cattle and cattle bells in the background, some voices from a distance, but just nature around you. The views. Part of the fun and games of herding cattle was encounters with the wasps. There was one particular one, type called magomombe. They would only nest maybe 2 or 3 of them. Yeah, it only needed one to discipline you. And then you had the smaller ones that would, even those as well, because they attacked as a gang. They're tagged as a gang, and you don't want to have an encounter with those. Otherwise, as far as the build is concerned, the main house is pretty much completed. We have 2 fully functional bathrooms now in place, the common bathroom and the en-suite bathroom. It is now just a question of aesthetics and of course the ceiling. The ceiling still needs putting in. We are just stuck on the designs. Otherwise, the main house is done. Next is the kitchen. What we have been intentional about is to retain the main structures and only make additions or some alterations like putting in the bathrooms. Otherwise, the soul of the homestead as it was envisaged by my parents has remained.
Thank you very much for watching. Why don't you subscribe to get an alert when the next video drops? In it, I will be sharing the specific problems we have faced and the comprehensive solution now in place for your own project.